Hello everyone, welcome to SOS Classroom, and today we will discuss the physiology of the lungs. In previous lecture we covered the anatomy of the lungs. So what are the physiology points we will discuss in this lectures? So first of all, we discuss the key points. What are the key points we cover in this lecture? So first of all, we covered the pulmonary ventilation. Pulmonary ventilation is also called a breathing. So what will happen in this? The oxygen and carbon dioxide comes in the lungs. Oxygen comes in the lungs and CO2 go out from the lungs. So this is called the pulmonary ventilation, or is also called a breathing. Next we will discuss the external respiration. External respiration occurs between the alveoli and pulmonary capillaries. You can see these are the pulmonary capillaries and this is the alveoli. So between the alveoli and pulmonary capillaries, the exchange of gases occurs, that is called the external respiration. Next we will talk about transport of gases. Transport of gases means how the oxygen comes into the capillaries and how the carbon dioxide comes in the alveoli. Next, we will discuss the internal respiration. Internal respiration means the exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen between the systemic capillaries and body tissues. So, between the body tissues and systemic capillaries, the exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen, that is called the internal respiration. Next, we will discuss about the cellular respiration. Cellular respiration means the respiration occurs inside the cells at the place of mitochondria, inside the mitochondria. That is also called the Krebs cycle or citric acid cycle or TCA cycles. So inside the mitochondria, there is Krebs cycle occurs with the presence of oxygen, that is called the cellular respiration. Next, we will talk about regulation of respiration. Regulation of respiration means how the control of respiration. And regulation of respiration controlled by the two methods. Number one, neural method, and number second, chemical controls. So we will discuss. And last, we will talk about pulmonary volumes and capacities. There are different types of volumes of the lungs and there are different types of capacity maintained by the lungs. So we will discuss. So first of all, we will talk about pulmonary respiration. Pulmonary respiration means the breathing. In the breathing, what will happen? The air comes from the atmosphere inside the lungs and the air from the lungs go out to the lungs in the external environment or atmosphere. That is called the breathing. When you are inhale, when you are exhale, that is called the breathing. So first of all, discuss the pulmonary respiration, how it is completed. The respiration completed by the three phases. Number one, inspiration. Number second, expiration. And number third, pause. Inspiration is also called inhalation, means the air moves from the atmosphere to the lungs, from the external environment to the lungs, that is called the inspiration. Next is the expiration. Expiration also called the exhalation. Exhalation means the air moves from the lungs to the atmosphere. And what is pause? Pause is the after the expiration, means after the second steps, there is a pause, there is a gap. That is called the pause before starting the next cycle or before starting the next inspiration. So there are three phases of the pulmonary respiration. Inspiration, which will be completed 2 to 3 seconds, and expiration also completed in 3 seconds, and pause 1 to 2 seconds. There is pause between the inspiration and expiration. After the completion of the inspiration and expiration, there is some gap, that is called the pause. So inspiration plus expiration plus pause, that is called the 1 respiration. So total in a 1 minute, there is 16 to 24 breathe. There is normal adult breathing cycle. You can see in the image, this is the inspiration and expiration. This is inspiration and expiration. And between the, after completion of the expiration, there is a small gap that is called the pause. So first of all, discuss the process of inspiration, process of inhalation, how the air moves from the atmosphere and reaches to the lungs with the respiratory tract. How the mechanism occurs to inhale the gases from the external atmosphere to the internal. Okay, so what are the steps involved in the inspirations? We will discuss. Number one, steps in the physiology of the lungs, diaphragm contracts. So first of all, you can see this is the diaphragm and these are the intercostal muscles. And this is the inspiration and expiration process occurs. So first of all, discussing about the inspirations. So what will happen in the physiology step number one? First of all, diaphragm contracts. Diaphragm contract means diaphragm in the relaxed condition, diaphragm is a muscle, so diaphragm in the normal condition present in the dome shape. You can see this is the dome shape. This is the dome shape structures, and when it is contract, then change into the flat shape. You can see dome shape change into flat shape. In the animation, you can see this is the dome shape change into flat. Dome shape change into flat. So this is called the contraction of the diaphragm. When contraction of the diaphragm occurs, then dome shape of the diaphragm change into the flat shape. Next steps, external intercostal muscles. You can see internal intercostal muscles and external intercostal muscles. So external intercostal muscles contract. You can see this is the ribs case, and between the ribs there is muscles present that is called the intercostal muscles. So external intercostal muscles contraction at the same time when the diaphragm contracts. When the intercostal muscles contract, then movement occurs upward and outward. Upward of the ribs, you can see these are the ribs moving upward, upper direction, and outward means outside or lateral sides. So lift the ribs upward and outward, that leads to the expand of the rib cage. Extend of the rib cage means the space between the thoracic cavity is increases. When the thoracic cavity increases, it means the thoracic cavity volume is also increases. And next steps, in the next step, what will happen? The thoracic cavity volume increases. Thoracic volume cavity volume increases. Why? Because of the diaphragm contract and external intercostal muscles contract, then leads to the increases of the thoracic cavity volume. So what are the volumes? You can see these are the intra-alveolar pressure. Intra-alveolar pressure, that is normally 760 at the normal conditions. You can see this is the interpleural pressure between the pleural cavity, that is 756 mm of Hg, and this is called the transpulmonary pressure. 760 minus 756 mm of Hg, it means intra-alveolar pressure minus intrapleural pressure, that is leads to the 4 mm of Hg. So when the thoracic cavity volume increases, it leads to the decrease of the pressure, that is intra-alveolar pressure. So intrapulmonary pressure is decreases. Intrapulmonary means intra-alveolar pressure decreases. Normally this is 760 mm of Hg, but when the thoracic cavity increases or volume of the thoracic cavity increases, it leads to the decreases of the intra-alveolar pressure. Alveolar pressure means inside the lungs. When the inside of the lungs, that is the intra-alveolar pressure is decreases, and outside of the atmosphere pressure is increases. There are two pressure. Number one, atmospheric pressure, and number two, intra-alveolar pressure. So when the thoracic cavity volume is increases, leads to the intra-alveolar pressure is decreases, and outside in the atmosphere increases pressure outside, and in the lungs pressure decreases. Then process of diffusion occurs. From the external environment there is high pressure, and internal environment there is low pressure. Then air flow into the lungs because of the high pressure in the atmosphere and low pressure inside the lungs. Then pressure or diffusion process occurs from the external environment to the internal environment, and air moves from the atmosphere to the lungs. That is called the Boyle's law. Boyle's law means the pressure inversely proportional to the volume. Volume means the pressure is increases, then volume is decreases. If the volume is increases, the pressure is decreases. So in the process of inspiration, when the contraction of the diaphragm, contraction of the intercostal muscles leads to the expand of the thoracic cavity. When the expand of the thoracic cavity occurs, there is decreases of the intrapulmonary pressure, or intra-alveolar pressure it decreases compared than the external environment. External environment or atmosphere have high pressure, and inside the lungs have low pressure. Then by the process of diffusion, air or oxygen moves from the external environment to the internal environment or inside the lungs. So this process is called the inspiration or inhalation. Next process is expiration or exhalation. At the opposite of the inspiration, what will happen in this? The relaxation of the diaphragm and relaxation of the intercostal muscles then leads to the decrease of the thoracic volume decreases and increase the intra-alveolar pressure. Then air moves from the lungs to the atmospheric pressure. Okay, you can see. First of all, diaphragm relax. When the diaphragm is relaxed, then move the upward. Flat shape change into dome shape. Means the diaphragm occurs in the flat shape and change into the dome shape or in the normal condition. So there is no energy required during the relaxation. So expiration process is also called a passive process. And inspiration required the energy or ATP in the muscles. So that is called the active process. So inspiration is active process which is required energy in the form of ATP, and expiration is a passive process which do not require any type of energy in the form of ATP. So what will happen in the expiration? First of all, diaphragm relax and intercostal muscles is relaxed. Then what will happen? Decreases the volume, decreases the thoracic cavity volume. When the thoracic volume is decreases, then by the process of Boyle's law, increases the pressure inside the lungs. Then intrapulmonary pressure is increases. Intrapulmonary means intra-alveolar pressure is increases. When the pressure increases inside the lungs by the CO2, and in the external environment there is no pressure or there is little bit pressure compared than the internal pressure, then air or carbon dioxide moves from the lungs to the external environment. You can see this is expiration and inspiration. That is expiration and inspiration. So this process is called the expiration. Next respiration is the external respiration. So external respiration occurs between the alveoli and pulmonary capillaries in the lungs. You can see these are the alveoli and these are the pulmonary capillaries. So between the pulmonary capillaries and alveoli exchange of gases, that is called the external respirations inside the lungs. How it is occurs? By the same process of diffusions. Simple diffusion. First of all, you can see the oxygen moves from the alveoli to the pulmonary capillaries. Because of in the alveoli there is high PCO2. PO2 means partial pressure of oxygen is high in the alveoli, and partial pressure of oxygen in the pulmonary capillaries is low. Then by the process of diffusion from the higher concentration to the lower concentration, oxygen moves from the alveoli to the pulmonary capillaries. This is called the simple diffusion. Next, same process occurs in the carbon dioxide process. In the capillaries, there is high PCO2, means partial pressure of carbon dioxide is high in the pulmonary capillaries. And in the alveoli, there is low PCO2, that is partial pressure of carbon dioxide is low in the alveoli. Then movement of carbon dioxide from the pulmonary capillaries to the alveoli. So this is also called a simple diffusion. So by the simple diffusion, movement of oxygen inside the pulmonary capillaries and movement of carbon dioxide into the alveoli, this is called the external respiration, which occurs inside the lungs. Next, third is the transport of gases. Transport of gases means how the air or oxygen moves from the alveoli to the pulmonary capillaries, and from the pulmonary capillaries, the carbon dioxide moves into the alveoli. Okay, so you can see first of all oxygen transports. So there is 100% oxygen in the alveoli, and transfer of oxygen into the pulmonary capillaries, there is 98% carried out and bound with the hemoglobin. So one hemoglobin molecules carry the 4 oxygen molecules and 98% carried by the hemoglobin. This is called the oxyhemoglobin. And 2% oxygen dissolved in the plasma. So there is 100% oxygen divided into two parts, that is 98% bound with the hemoglobin and circulate inside the body, and 2% dissolved in the plasma. Next, carbon dioxide, 70% used as a bicarbonate ion and 23% bound with the hemoglobin, that is called carbaminohemoglobin, and 7% dissolved in the plasma. So this is the distributions of the carbon dioxides. Next, for respiration is the internal respiration. So internal respiration occurs between the systemic capillaries and body tissues. You can see this is the systemic capillaries and these are the tissues. So exchange of gases, that is oxygen and carbon dioxide between the tissues and systemic capillaries, that is called the internal respiration. So how it is process occurs? First of all, inside the tissue. Inside the tissue, there is partial pressure of oxygen approximately 40 mm of Sg. That is the lower than the arterial blood oxygen. That is 95 mm of Sg. So tissue have low oxygen and arterial has 95, that is the high oxygen. So movement of oxygen occurs from the blood capillaries, that is the systemic capillaries, into the body tissues. That is called the simple diffusion. For oxygen diffuse from the blood to the tissue. And same another process, that is inside the tissue there is PCO2 approximately 45 mm Sg, that is the higher than the arterial blood, that is approximately 40 mm of Sg. Then movement of carbon dioxide from the tissue to the systemic capillaries. So this is the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide occurs at the place of tissue and systemic capillaries. That is called the internal respirations. Number 5 is the cellular respiration. So after the tissue respiration, the cellular respiration occurs inside the cells, and inside the cells there is one mitochondria or organelles carry the oxygen and complete the process of Krebs cycle or TCA cycle, or also called a citric acid cycle, and create the different types of molecules. So utilization of oxygen inside the mitochondria and generate the ATP by the process of oxidative phosphorylation or citric acid cycles. Inside the mitochondria, what will happen? By using of the glucose and oxygen and water, and change into the carbon dioxide plus water molecules plus ATP molecules or energy molecules, and the product of CO2 is carried back to the lungs for the eliminations or expirations. So you can see this is the nutrients, this is the oxygen, and change into carbon dioxide, ATP molecules and water molecules. And carbon dioxide molecules comes into the systemic capillaries and go to the lungs. And from the lungs, there is external respiration occurs, and then simple breathing occurs, and carbon dioxide moves from the lungs to the external environment. Next, the regulation of respirations. So regulation of respiration controlled by the neural and chemical controls. First of all, you can see the regulation of respiration controlled by the two centers or two methods. Number one, neural control by the nervous system, and second is the chemical control by the chemoreceptors. So first of all, you can see neural control done by the brain stem. In the brain stem, there is two mainly parts, medullary centers in the medulla oblongata and in the pons centers. So there are two centers in the medulla oblongata and two centers in the pons. In the medulla oblongata, there is DRG center and VRG. DRG means dorsal respiratory group and VRG means ventral respiratory group. And in the pons also have a two centers. Number one, pneumotaxic center and apneustic center. There are two centers in the medulla and two centers in the pons. And the chemical control done by the chemoreceptors. So there are two types of chemoreceptors. One present in the central chemoreceptors and second is the peripheral chemoreceptors. So first of all, discussing the neural control. How the neural control the respirations. So there are different types of centers. So first of all, you can see the images or brain stem. So this part is called the pons, and this part is called the medulla oblongata. You can see the brain structures. So in the brain stem, there are three parts of the brain. Number one, midbrain, topmost, pons in the middle, and medulla lower. So there are midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata comes together and called the brain stem. Here you can see only two portions. Outer is the pons and bottom is the medulla oblongata. So two centers in the pons and two centers in the medulla oblongata. So what are the two centers in the pons? There is pneumotaxic center. You can see this is the pneumotaxic center, and second is the apneustic center. And the medulla oblongata also have a two centers. Number one, DRG, that is the dorsal respiratory group, and second is the ventral respiratory group. Dorsal respiratory group responsible for the inspirations and ventral respiratory group responsible for the inspiration plus expirations also. So ventral also have two process, inspiration and expiration, but dorsal means DRG respiration group only control the inspirations. So first of all, discussing the medullary respiratory center means centers present in the medulla. First is the dorsal respiratory group. So first of all, you can focus only the DRG group. This is the dorsal respiratory group. Dorsal means backside and ventral means anterior, and this is the posterior. So what are the locations of the DRG? You can see this is present in the medulla oblongata. What is function? This control the inspiration. So DRG system control the inspirations and act as the inspiration center. How it is controlled? DRG means dorsal respiratory group send the electrical signal through the nerves, through the phrenic and intercostal nerve, and leads to the contraction of the diaphragm and contraction of the external intercostal muscles. Because DRG control the inspiration, so DRG control the two muscles of respiration. Number one, diaphragm, and number second, external intercostal muscles. So it send the signals to the diaphragm and send the signal to the external intercostal muscles at the same time and leads to the contraction of the both the muscles of the respiration. That is the diaphragm and external intercostal muscles. So responsible for the basic rhythm of breathing. Basic rhythm of breathing means there is normally 16 to 24 breath per minute is controlled by the DRG centers. Next center is the VRG. VRG means you can focus here at the anterior part of the medulla oblongata, that is ventral respiratory group. So ventral respiratory group control the expiration and control the inspiration. So what is location? Location you can see present in the medulla at the anterior part of the medulla or ventrolateral medulla. What is function? Active during the forced breathing. Active during the forced breathing means during the exercises. When you are running, when you are walking, when you are doing the exercises, then leads to the extra respiration, then activation of the VRG and leads to the completion of the breathing. Control both the inspiration and expiration. You can see it has both the neurons, expirations and inspirations. And during the quiet breathing, VRG remain inactive. Quiet breathing means there is normal breathing. When you are taking the respiration between the 16 or 24, there is no activation of the VRG. But when you are running, when you are doing the heavy exercises, then activation of the VRG and provide the extra forces in the intercostal muscles or diaphragm and leads to the extra respirations. It enhances the breathing efforts during the stress or during the exercises. So what are the difference between dorsal respiration group and ventral respiratory group? DRG control the inspiration, normal respiration, and ventral activate during the stress, during the exercises, during the running, during the walking. VRG group activate and control both the process, that is the inspiration and expirations. Next is the Pons centers. Pons centers also called the pontic respiratory centers. So Pons center, there is pneumotaxis center and apneustic centers. So what is the location? Location pneumotaxis center present in the upper portion of the pons and apneustic center present lower portion of the pons. So what is function? So function is the inhibit inspiration or stop the DRG function. So what is the function of DRG? DRG function activate the inspiration by the process of contraction of the diaphragm and contraction of the external intercostal muscles. Then activate of the pneumotaxic center and control the inspirations. Control or inhibit the inspirations. A stronger pneumotaxic center signal leads to the faster and slower breathing. Next, what is the function of apneustic centers? Apneustic center location is lower portion of the pons part and function is stimulate and prolong the inspirations. Prolong the inspiration or excitatory signal to the DRG and promote the deep inspiration. Deep inspiration required mainly in the process of during the exercises or during the stress conditions. So balanced by the pneumotaxic center ensure the smooth transition between the inspiration and expirations. Next is the coordination between centers. So you can see these are the coordination, how the coordination occurs between the center. Number one, DRG start the inspiration. DRG start the inspiration means the phrenic nerve give the signal to the diaphragm and external intercostal muscles and start the contraction. Then process of inspiration occurs. Next, pneumotaxis center control the inspiration or inhibit the inspiration or stop the inspiration which is generated by the DRG. So start the inspiration by the DRG and control the inspiration by the pneumotaxic center. And in the case of the extra requirement of the oxygen during the exercises, the VRG means ventral respiration group add the extra respirations or more breathing effort when it is needed. When it is needed during the exercises or during the stress conditions, extra oxygen required to completion of the body requirements. In that case, VRG activate and provide the extra forces during the inspiration and expiration. That's why VRG involved in the both the process, that is the inspiration and expirations. And pneumotaxis centers fine-tune and depth of inspirations. Apneuristic center control the fine-tuning between the inspiration and expiration and taking the deep inspiration and deep expirations. So these are the coordination occurs between the different types of centers. There are two centers in the pons part and two centers in the medulla parts. Next, control by the chemical control. So this is very complicated structures. You can see, we will try to solve it. So first of all, you can see here, inside the blood, what will happen? Inside the blood, there is carbon dioxide. Inside the blood, there is oxygen. And inside the blood, there is pH level. pH level is 7.35 to 7.45. That is little bit alkaline in nature of the blood. And what will happen if the carbon dioxide is increases inside the blood? If the carbon dioxide increases inside the blood, then also increases the hydrogen molecules. Then pH level is decreases. So what will happen and what is the function of central chemoreceptors? First of all, you can see the location. Location is the medulla oblongata near the DRG. So you can see this is the DRG structures and these are the chemoreceptors. These are the central chemoreceptors. These are the central chemoreceptors. So what is the function of chemoreceptors? We will try to understand. First of all, you can see inside the blood, what is the condition? Inside the blood, there is increasing of the carbon dioxide. If the carbon dioxide increases and leads to the decrease of the pH level or decrease of the oxygen level, then DRG or central chemoreceptors activate. When the central chemoreceptor activates, it leads to the maximum exhalation of the carbon dioxide from the body to the lungs or external environment. Then pH level return to the normal pH level, that is 7.35 to 7.45. Okay, you can see the mechanism by this flow charts. First of all, what will happen in the blood? In the blood, there is increased carbon dioxide level. There is conditions of the patient increasing of the carbon dioxides. Normally, there is 23 to 29 milliequivalent per liter, but increases more than 29 milliequivalent per liter in the blood. Then what will happen? Increases also hydrogen ions plus bicarbonate. So how it is increases hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions? So you can see what will happen in the blood. Carbon dioxide inside the blood increases. Carbon dioxide dissolve in the water. There is H2O and CO2 and formation of the H2CO3. H2 from the water and one water molecules adding with the carbon dioxide molecules. This is form the CO3 and this is H2. This is form the H2CO3. H2CO3, it is called the carbonic acid. You can see CO2 forming the carbonic acid in the cerebrospinal fluid. Then again process occurs, splitting of the carbonic acid into two molecules. Number one, hydrogen ions, and number two, HCO3. So H2 change into H and one H adding with the CO3 and form the HCO3. HCO3 is bicarbonate ion and this is the hydrogen ions. So increasing of the hydrogen ions and also increasing of the bicarbonate ions. So this is the chemical process occurs inside the cerebrospinal fluid. In that case means when the hydrogen ion is increases and bicarbonate also increases, or we can say when the blood carbon dioxide is increases, or we can say that when the carbonic acid formation occurs, then activation of the chemoreceptors. Activation of chemoreceptors means activation of the central chemoreceptors. The central chemoreceptors activate the centers of the DRG, and DRG activate the more CO2 exhaled during the expiration, or DRG activate the muscles of the respiration. Then maximum of carbon dioxide is exhaled from the blood to the external environment. Then carbon dioxide is decreases. When the carbon dioxide is decreases, then pH return to the normal. So first of all, you can see this also flowchart. First of all, increasing the carbon dioxide in the blood, then leads to the increasing of the hydrogen ions, leads to the decrease of the pH level, that is also called the acidic in nature, and this is also called a respiratory acidosis. When the pH level decreases, then activating of the central chemoreceptors at the place of DRG. Near the DRG, there are chemoreceptors present, central chemoreceptor present, and activation of the chemoreceptors activate of the respiratory center in the medulla. Respiratory center in the medulla, that is the DRG and VRG, and by the activation of the medulla centers leads to the maximum exhalation of the carbon dioxide from the blood to the lungs. And when the carbon dioxide level is decreases, then pH level return to the normal. So this condition is controlled by the chemical control or central chemoreceptors. Next is the lungs volume and capacities. So what are the lungs volume and what are the capacities of the lungs to hold the air? So these are the lungs volume and these are the lung capacities. So first of all, you can see lungs volume. In the lungs volume, there is different types of lungs volume. First is the tidal volume, in the short TV, inspiratory reserve volume, IRV, expiratory reserve volume, ERV, and residual volume, RV. So these are the four volume in the lungs. And what are the lungs capacities? Number one, vital capacity, functional residual capacity, and total lung capacity. So first of all, discussing the lung volumes. First is the tidal volume. Tidal volume means you are taking the breathing and expirations, means inspiration volume and expiration volume, that is called the tidal volume. So normally you inhale the approximately 500 ml of breathing or air, and expiration also expirate the or exhale the 500 volume of air, that is called the tidal volume. In the tidal volume divided into two portions. So first of all, you can see the 350 ml of air reaches to the alveoli only. From the 500 ml of tidal volume, only 350 ml responsible or participate for the gas exchange at the place of lungs or alveoli, but 150 ml only remain in the anatomical dead space. Anatomical dead space means conductive portion of the lungs. Conductive portion means there is present in the lungs, present in the trachea and bronchi. So there is no gas exchange occurs at their place. No trachea and bronchi, there is no exchange of gases occurs at this place. That's why it is called the anatomical dead space. So 150 ml remain in the anatomical dead space and only 350 ml reaches to the alveoli and participate in the gas exchange with the blood. How to control the tidal volume? So tidal volume controlled by the respiratory centers in the medulla and pons. So already we discussed the centers of the medulla and centers of the pons. In the normal condition, there is approximately 500 ml is the tidal volume, and during the exercises, it go up to the 2000 ml or more than 2000 ml, and during the sleep or during the anesthesia, there is decreases of the tidal volume. Next volume is the inspiratory reserve volume, that is the IRV. Inspiratory reserve volume means what? You are taking the normal inspiration. You are taking the normal inspiration means taking the normal tidal volume, that is approximately 500 ml. And after taking the normal 500 ml, your lungs have also capacity to inhale extra air after the inspiration. Means normally 500 ml you already take inside the lungs, but lungs also have a capacity to inhale extra air after the inspiration, that is called the inspiratory reserve volume. It means extra air you can breathe when you take a deep breath after a normal inhalation or inspiration. So normally you can take about 3 liters of air after the inspirations. After the inspiration means approximately 500 of tidal volume, and after the tidal volume you can take extra breath approximately 3 liters. So this is called the inspiratory reserve volume. How to control? This same controlled by the DRG center in the medulla oblongata, and apnoeic centers in the pons can prolong the inspiration and increase the IRV during the deep breathing. Next is the expiratory reserve volume. Same opposite of the IRV. When you are expirating the 500 ml tidal volume, and after the normal expiration, also lungs have capacity to exhale the extra air from the lungs, that is called the expiratory reserve volume. So you have normally capacity to exhale the lungs capacity, that is 500, and after 500 your lungs also have a capacity to exhale extra air from the lungs to the external environment, that is called the expiratory reserve volume. So normally you can exhale after the normal expiration, that is 1000 to 1200 ml. How to control? Control by the VRG center. So expiratory control by the VRG center, and also VRG control the inspirations. So VRG both have a neural nerves, inspiration and expirations. VRG become active during the forced expiration. Forced expiration required during the exercises, during the coughing and during the stress. Last volume is the reserve volume. Reserve volume means when the expiration occurs, forceful expiration occurs, but lungs also have some space or some air inside the lungs after completion of the forced expirations. Some space or some air remain in the lungs after completion of the forced expiration. That is called the residual volume. Residual volume means the extra volume lungs maintain to prevent from the collapse. This volume is called the residual volume. So this volume cannot be exhaled voluntarily because it is stay inside the lungs. Now discussing the vital capacity. So lungs also have a different types of vital capacity. So first of all, vital capacity means the maximum amount of air can be expelled from the lungs after a maximum inspiration. Maximum inspiration, then maximum expiration, it is called the vital capacity. So what is the formula of vital capacity? IRV, inspiratory reserve volume, plus tidal volume, plus expiratory reserve volume. That is called the vital capacity of the lungs. So what is the IRV? That is 3000 ml, tidal volume 500 ml, and ERV 1100 ml. So total vital capacity is 3000 plus 500 plus 1100, that is 4600 ml, approximately 4.6 liters. So 4.6 liters of vital capacity of the lungs. Next is the functional residual capacity or FRC. Functional residual capacity means amount of air remaining in the lungs after normal expiration. Normal expiration means normal tidal volume. Some air remain in the lungs after a normal expiration. So what is the formula of FRC? Expiratory reserve volume, that is ERV, plus residual volume. Because expiratory reserve volume means maximum air you can expel after the tidal volume, plus residual volume remain in the lungs always. So both together it is called functional residual volume. ERV normally 1100 ml and residual volume is 1200 ml. So total FRC is 2300 ml approximately. So these are the volume depending on the lungs capacity. So in the adults, there is little bit different of the vital capacity or volumes maybe varies. Next is the total lung capacity. Total lung capacity means total or maximum amount of air in the lungs can hold after a maximum inspiration. So what is the formula of TLC? IRV plus TV plus ERV plus RV. Inspiratory reserve volume plus tidal volume plus expiratory reserve volume plus reserve volume. 3000 ml plus 500. 3000 means IRV 3000. Tidal volume 500. Expiratory reserve volume 1100. And residual volume remain in the lungs, that is 1200 ml. And total is 5800 ml approximately. So 5800 ml or 5.8 liter approximately, this is called the total lung capacity. So this is all about the physiology of the lungs. I hope you understand. If you have any doubt related to the physiology of the lungs, you can comment me. And thank you for watching this video. If you like the video, subscribe the channel. Thank you so much.